final case on our calendar this morning is Florida Bar versus Gleck. No problem. To make sure you're ready. Okay.
May it please the court. Good morning. My name is Juan Carlos Arias, and I represent the Florida Bar in this case. The cases before you are two combined Supreme Court cases which include 8 complaints, and there are about 4 patterns of misconduct. The first one is misconduct relating to the attorney-client relationship, dealing with neglect, lack of diligence, and communication. The second pattern is a business relationship or partnership between the attorney and a non-attorney in the practice of law.
I'd like for you to explore that a little bit with us.
Yes, Your Honor.
What are the necessary elements? Does it have to be a partnership? Can it be just a business relationship? Explain to us what you see the facts to be and what the Florida law is in this particular area on this count. Because this seems to be maybe one of the most substantial parts. There are others are more straightforward than this one, I think, maybe.
Yes. Chief Justice Lewis, the referee in the report found both a business relationship or a partnership. She was very careful in drafting it that way. And that is because we don't have proof that there were contracts and that things were done in a particular way. But in practice, what Mr. Gluck had at the location of Millenia in Aventura was a storefront that he would visit once or twice a month that was ran, operated by this non-lawyer. She was the one drafting documents. She was the one using her staff of the Millenia business to do all attorney-client related responsibilities for Mr. Gluck. They were answering the phone. They were using photocopiers. They combined, they blended this law firm that really didn't exist with an operation of a consulting firm that was run by this non-lawyer, Ms. Betchinger. So in practice, you could not separate what was going on there, and that's why the referee found that we had indeed an improper relationship. We don't know who was paying for the utilities.
Was there anything wrong with him agreeing as a lawyer to provide limited legal work for people that came into the office with immigration issues? In other words, just as a starting point, if people came to this office, would there ordinarily be anything wrong with him providing the legal side of it to clients that came in for help with immigration issues to that office?
The problem, Justice Hanstead, is that he did not participate in any of the process from the beginning or the arrival of the client to the filling out of the documents that he rubber stamped 1 or twice a month. So when these clients came in, these vulnerable clients, immigrants, went in, they only met that one paralegal that spoke Portuguese. Their questions were being answered, and that's in the record. We had Mr. Ramos, we have Ms. Nakad. They never met Gluck. All their questions, legal questions, were answered by this paralegal. They thought that they were hiring an attorney from the moment of the step 1 on immigration, which was the labor application, until the conclusion of their legality in the country. So they didn't understand that oh yeah, Ms. Betchinger could do a portion of it. She can do the labor certification for you. They didn't understand that. They hired Mr. Gluck because we learned, as you know, he denied being an attorney at that location. He actually said he was a subcontractor of Millennia.
Is there evidence that Mr. Gluck was sharing in the profits of this corporation?
We have contracts and we have checks that were introduced that showed that he was the attorney that was hired from the beginning, from the labor certification point, and that he received the check made to his law firm. We have learned
Well, that goes to his participation as a lawyer. I'm saying the referee found and you argue that there was a partnership between him and non-lawyers. So what evidence was there of a formal partnership? Did he own stock in this corporation? Did he receive part of the profits of this corporation? Those kinds of things that would evidence that there was a partnership as opposed to some other inappropriate relationship.
Justice Cantero, we asked Mr. Gluck to provide documents from this sworn statement I obtained from him way back in 2006. Show us that you were paying for the running of this operation in Millennia, because at that time he was claiming that he did not have a law firm there. You see?
Well, let's just stop right there for a minute. If a lawyer, if I'm practicing, and I go to Millennium, and I'm not paying any rent or anything, but I go there to give legal advice to clients when they come in. And I think we're going to hear, he's asking about, does that make it a business relationship just because I go there, if the check is made payable to me?
Well, the problem is that that check was being processed through two ways. These checks were being processed two ways. They could be made payable to Millennia. We see a pattern. We saw contracts made to Millennia. And we also saw in the same location contracts made with Mr. Gluck. So we have these contracts and checks being made to Millennia or to his law firm.
Please finish your answer with Justice Cantero. I didn't mean to interrupt.
And thank you. And so we have, this operation was ran very loosely by this paralegal.
Were there any checks from Millennia to Gluck?
No, but we have statements, billing statements on contracts between Gluck and the clients, and the billing statements came from Millennia. That's in the record. How can that be? If they hire Mr. Gluck and they have a contract with Mr. Gluck, why is Millennia actually receiving the funds on a monthly basis? Because these people were paying monthly payments towards their legal services. So we have a complete blending of this operation. We don't know who was paying for the electricity. We don't know who was paying for the water. We don't know that. It just both operations were feeding from each other. And the reality is, based on the evidence in this case, is that Mr. Gluck was nowhere around.
Was there also a claim that he abandoned some of these clients?
Absolutely.
Would you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. This operation in Millennia closed when Ms. Betchinger decided to go back to Brazil. So all the hundreds of cases, we only have 8, that went through that office were left in limbo.
Well, what was the status of Millennia at that point? And you need
She
to
closed the
add that
doors, Justice Quinn.
Well,
She
I
closed
thought Millennia was actually now owned by some friends of hers. So if there were other people, what happened? So when she went back to Brazil, the whole operation fell apart.
She was the operation. She did say at the UPL transcript that is part of the record. As you know, there's history here. Mr. Gluck was actually the attorney from Betchinger in a UPL case where she agreed to an injunction from this court not to engage in helping people in immigration. And he was the attorney of record. At that UPL hearing, and that's in the record, Mr. Gluck didn't know that Ms. Betchinger in 1997 had opened a law firm of Gluck in Orlando. A member of the UPL committee went outside and called the number, and there was an answering machine that said, the law offices of Attorney Gluck, and he had to go on the record in the UPL hearing in 97 to explain that he had not given her permission to do that. Mr. Gluck had had a relationship with this non-attorney for a long time, and he still chose to open a business with her in 2001. So that's why we come here and we feel very strongly about this case.
I asked you about whether there was proof that particular clients were abandoned or harmed. And
absolutely.
So
I'll give you 2 examples.
What the record shows us about
yes,
that.
Justice Ansted, there are 2 examples. In the Ramos case, this gentleman paid, documents were submitted, But then the Labor Department asked for a follow-up, for a clarification. There was an issue with the employer. That letter came back to Millenia because Gluck put the Millenia office address in all the filings he did. He didn't use his law firm in Hollywood. So when that office closed, guess what happens to all the follow-ups? Remember, in 2001, April, there was a change in the immigration law. So everybody was getting in their labor certifications. There was such a backlog that they started looking at the actual files in 2002, 2003, start sending documentation to the attorney of record. Please, could you fix this? Could you? Millenia was closed. He took no steps to make sure that that correspondence got to him because he was the attorney that signed those documents.
How did Mr. Kimmel play into this? I thought he had given these files to another attorney who was
some of them. Just when some of these files were transferred without the knowledge of the actual clients, by the way, many of them didn't know. In the Ramos case, he didn't know anything about the transfer of his file. He learns that the Department of Labor had canceled the application because there was no response. He goes online in 2005, I believe, and he learns that, and he starts looking for Mr. Gluck. He couldn't find Mr. Gluck. When he actually files the complaint, Mr. Gluck reappears and meets with Mr. Ramos, and guess what he tells Mr. Ramos? You contracted with Millenia. They have your money. It wasn't me, but he was. He had Mr. Ramos saw Mr. Gluck's law office sign at the door. So when the Florida Bar was getting all this info, Mr. Ramos also had a business card that said Bettinger, paralegal, Gluck office in Aventura. Mr. Gluck misled the Florida Bar for over 2 years, telling us in responses that allegedly Millenia had a contract. He was distancing himself from all these complaints for over 2 years. He came to a source statement I took of him in 2006, and he still kept saying that.
Okay, what other, was it just Ramos, or were there?
No, we also have Ms. Nakad, who served 7-8 months in Crone. Why? Because she missed a hearing. Why? Because the documentation.
Doesn't the record reflect, as far as she is concerned, that he was not the attorney of record for her, and that a copy of the document that required her to come to court was never sent to him?
What happens is that she first hired Gluck in '99, I believe, for a replacement of a card, entry card. And she went back to his law office in Millenia in 2001. She never met Gluck. So when you hear Gluck making explanations about what's happening in his law firm at Aventura, he wasn't there. But you do hear from the clients who were there, who spoke to Bettinger, telling you and telling us, I hired him for that second portion of immigration issues in 2001. So he's giving explanations for everything, but he wasn't there. The complainants were there. The complainants are the ones that were credible, and that's what the referee found. The referee completely dismissed his explanations because he doesn't know what was going on at that operation because he wasn't there. So I understand that Gluck has explanations for everything, but we need to hear what the complainants have to say because they were there.
Before you sit down, Justice Anstead was interested in the numbers. Are there more than the two as reflected that were harmed? That actually were supposed to be represented that were abandoned?
There are more.
How many?
The Oliveira, Miss Oliveira that testified from Massachusetts.
How many?
Well, they all were abandoned. That's why they were complaining because they never became legal. Their process was never completed.
How many proof at the hearing? How many clients were identified at the hearing?
All of them, their process of immigration from labor cert to actually becoming legal was never concluded by Mr.
He understands
Gluck.
that. He's asking numbers. How many?
Eight cases. Eight clients.
Okay, all right.
And you think
And that's why they're
the tip of the, I mean, if there may be many more, but you just stopped it.
He acknowledged, Mr. Gluck acknowledged that was a crazy time, that those months before April of 2001 were crazy. I mean, hundreds of people went through that office.
You're about to use up your time, so you'll save some time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Good morning. May it please the court, my name is Kevin Tynan, pursuant to the court